I feel like crying now. And maybe it's because I'm old and I'm like, I work in the area of bringing people to that place. I like, what a victory.
Yeah.
What a victory. Today we have for you two missionaries who have come from America, who felt called to follow the Lord, bring their family to Ireland, and they're Thomas and Genevieve Vehige. They're from Louisiana, and they're here to talk with us about why they felt inspired to come to Ireland, bring their family, make this incredibly courageous step to come here. And like, who is Jesus to them? Are they Catholic? All that sort of thing. So let's feast our ears and feast our eyes on these beautiful people who are here before us. Thomas and Genevieve, you're very welcome.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
So excited
really
to be
cool
here.
Yeah.
Good on you. Thank you for being here.
How long have you been here now?
2 months.
2 months.
Wow.
2 months.
2 months.
A lot of people would say, please don't move to Ireland coming into winter, try and experience a bit of the spring and the summer. But so far the weather hasn't been too bad.
I feel like it's been, because I was imagining the absolute worst, it's been great.
Yeah, that's so good. That's good. That's the right attitude.
It was my biggest fear coming in. And they always say with missions, they say, whatever your biggest fear is, that's probably not what's going to be the problem.
Yeah.
And it's been true. It's been much more doable.
Yeah.
But it's funny because the weather app said just pouring down rain all week. But the sun's
It's
out
not
this morning.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And this is what happens. They're
I
biased.
never look at those things.
Yeah.
I don't. What's the point? It's
And while it mightn't be, the weather might not be as good as, I think it's 70% chance of rain. That means it might rain 70% of the time. The rest of the time it might be cloudy or it could be sunny.
Yeah.
But the impression that we get is that it's,
And it hasn't been.
it hasn't been good.
Anyway, you bought good raincoats.
Yeah.
Live in Ireland, have raincoat in car.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Especially the west of Ireland. It's like two different countries. The west coast, which gets all the weather in from the Atlantic, and then the east coast, which gets the weather after we get dumped on the west coast.
Wow.
And even and then there's Dublin and south of Dublin to Wexford and Waterford. They get incredible weather down there.
Oh, really?
You're not talking about the Azores, but it's a lot better, a lot drier, sunnier.
So funny thing. You messaged me the other day and you're like, I hear there's a storm coming. I'm like, you're used to hurricanes and all that kind of stuff. Don't worry about it. We lost our polytunnel.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And
Again.
So this is the
Second time in 1 year.
Second time in a year.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we were like, yellow warning, schmick, whatever, it's not going to be a big deal. They talk about this all the time. And on Sunday it was gone.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's a big deal. It's a big polytunnel.
Yeah, it is. So for us, the storm, I was like, oh, wow, it was just like wind. So it was really different than,
Yeah.
there's nothing to be nervous about. I think I actually went out to the grocery store and,
Yeah. I drove to Dublin. I'm back. Yeah. I had to. So, yeah.
Good for you. Good for you, Sheena. So I suppose the first question I'll ask you guys is are you Christian? Are missionaries? You could be Mormons, you could be Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yeah.
Are you let's start at the base level. Obviously you're here as missionaries, you're advocating for a God that you believe in. Is that God the Christian God?
Yes.
Okay. That's good. This might appear to be ridiculous line of questioning. So it's Jesus Christ who you actually believe in.
Yeah. No, we're Roman Catholic.
Okay.
So yeah.
I remember in the Philippines, so I served as a missionary in the Philippines for 4 years, and there was Jehovah's Witnesses there, Mormons, and I remember we did a lot of street ministry, and I wore a large crucifix because I wanted people to know that, no, I'm actually Catholic. Mm-hmm. I'm not another denomination or whatnot, because people were quite surprised by Catholic missionaries there and everywhere, honestly. But yeah.
So we're actually quite unusual in the sense that you are supported by an organization called Family Mission Company.
Yeah.
We work with NET. We're missionaries as well. We run a mission also. But in terms of the Irish audience, I'm conscious all the time, like you mentioned, people will know that we're actually Catholic by a crucifix. That means nothing to an Irish Catholic.
Really?
Yeah, because they're like, it's a cross. Therefore, people know you're Christian. But the difference, because we're not used to doing apologetics with Protestants in Ireland and defending our faith, we don't know the differences between the different Christian faith denominations. And so can you please explain what you mean by that? So what you're saying is we on our cross,
Yes,
we have a corpus.
Yes, we have a corpus, the body of Christ. So, because if it was just a plain wood, which a lot of our missionaries wear, but you can be assumed to be kind of any Christianity, like, or I guess particularly in the Philippines, I was trying to differentiate that I was not a Jehovah's Witness. I wasn't a Mormon, which I don't even know if they would be wearing crosses there, but that we actually went to the Catholic Church. There was a large Catholic church in the city, but so yes, so that and there it would signal and to some people that like, okay, this is because they were always watching. They're like, what are you doing? Why are you talking to that person on the street and whatnot? Very curious.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
And what does the corpus signify? Maybe you don't know the answer to this question, and that's okay. Don't feel under pressure. But what does the corpus signify that a cross does not? So a crucifix for Catholics. I think I have some idea what the answer to that is, and if you don't know, that's okay.
Well, I think Catholics more focus on Jesus on the cross would be like my understanding. And like in the more coming from a Protestant view of things, they're focusing on
the resurrection, I would say.
The victory of the cross.
As Catholics, we believe that the greatest moment of love was Jesus's life given for us on the cross. And then the resurrection is extremely important, but that love, that sacrifice that he made comes first, and then the beautiful resurrection. And so that's what I would say is like it's like getting to being reminded of the love that Jesus has for me whenever I see that that crucifix with Christ's body on it.
Yeah.
It's funny, like we were just chatting before we came on here, and we were talking about marriage and how, scripture talks about how the man lays down his life for his bride, and how Jesus, the bridegroom, laid down his life for his bride, the church. And you just described it perfectly there. Like it's that ultimate sacrifice of love. And if that ultimate sacrifice is not there within a marriage, the joy of the resurrection is not there.
Yeah.
It's not,
Yeah.
And that's the whole like Paschal mystery embedded within a sacramental marriage, and how we as married people mirror that relationship of Christ and his church.
Yeah.
There you go.
There's a
Guess what class I'm doing at the moment? Marriage.
The church taught somewhere in Vatican II, I'm not sure exactly where, but it says man does not fully find himself until he makes a sincere gift of himself to others. Yeah. And like that's the case. So like Jesus, when he resurrected, had to be the happiest he ever was because he poured out everything on the cross. He held nothing back. And like that's the call of a husband and a wife, is to both find the ways that they can pour themselves out completely for the other. And it's in doing that we mirror who Christ is, and we find who we are, right? So that
Amen.
I love that.
And I wouldn't like anybody who's listening to this conversation get the impression that our lives are perfect and that we are perfect, and that when we talk about laying our lives down for our bride, I'm so happy that you can say that and look me in the eye, or at least look Thomas and Genevieve in the eye when you're saying that, because none of us have all this sorted. Like it's a daily choice to
Totally.
a daily choice to pick up the cross, and I don't mean you. I mean
all
the
of us.
cross. I mean our vocation, and laying down our life, and
Even choosing to be nice to each other. That's
hard.
a choice.
It's hard, yeah.
yeah.
Some days.
Some days
Yeah.
it is. Yeah.
Yeah. How do you
I know
guys
we're
go with that?
digressing
Yeah,
now.
but this is a conversation that we're having.
Well-
we're talking about missionary life. Like
well,
you're supposed to have everything sorted.
Yeah.
And you could very
figured it
easily
out a couple years ago.
Can we just pause on that for a second? And we will come back to it, but I would love to just maybe talk a tiny bit about Family Mission Company, who they are, how you got involved, how you came to be even missionaries, conversion experience.
Yeah, that's so good. You should do a podcast.
Why don't you go first?
Yeah. Well, who is Family Missions Company?
You want me to answer it? So I think it's been 25 years, almost 26 years. there was a couple, Frank and Jeannie Summers. They were actually, before they started Family Missions Company, they were on the verge of divorce. The husband, just very involved in the world. They were raised Catholic, but they weren't in a place where they were practicing much, and they were on the verge of divorce. And the husband, Frank, had this profound experience of an encounter with God, and his wife around the same time. They were actually separated, not legally, but just like in different places. And she also experienced the Lord, and
independently of each other.
Yeah, and started reading the Bible and taking what Jesus said seriously. And so they got back together, recommitted to their marriage, and in some time, I think they were very involved in the charismatic renewal at that point, and felt the Lord call them to do missions. And they looked into doing missions as a family. I think they had one child at that point, and different organizations said that that's not a thing for lay people unless you don't have children. And they had too many children, which was one, to do missions. And so they decided to just pray and ask the Lord where He would send them. I think they went to the Tonga Islands.
Where is that?
It's
somewhere.
If we had a map, I could show you, but
I couldn't. But they went there and served with the support of the local charismatic community back in Abbeville, Louisiana, that area, and they were in different places all over the world as a family, doing missions for some time. And then one of their children got sick and needed medical care back in the States, so they moved home at that point. And then felt the Lord call them to set up an organization that allowed lay people, singles and whole families, to do foreign mission work, to preach the gospel and serve the poor. And so that at that point when they started Family Missions Company, I think was 25, almost 26 years ago, and so that's how Family Missions Company started. They started the organization to train and send out lay people.
Wow.
And how many married couples would you have in the field at any one time? Do you know that?
that's a good question.
It would have been good to look up this information before.
No,
I think they say there's like around 200 missionaries or some kind of number, but how many different families? I don't know.
That's big.
That's a lot. Yeah.
But like we're counting children as well.
Doesn't matter.
It's still a lot. You know, it's
no, it is. It's a good amount. So I found out about it through my sister, Teresa, who you all met. Mm-hmm. She's been with Family Missions Company for 15 years.
Hi, Teresa.
And when she joined, my whole family was like, yeah, that makes sense. You know, she was always like, we call her Mother Teresa, you know, like, but I wanted nothing to do with it. And I did not want to be like Teresa. She was like the sibling that I butt heads with because she was my mother hen.
Was your family religious?
Yes. So we grew up, my parents divorced when I was 6 or separated, but my dad would always come on Sunday. He'd pick us up and take us to mass, and we'd typically walk to mass and we'd go with him. My mom stopped going at that point. But he was very faithful, and Sunday was his day, our day with my dad, and he'd take us to mass, and then we'd go and do things with him. So kind of interesting though, because like it was primarily in the home with my mom, who was not practicing a faith, but then my dad, you know, strongly was practicing his faith. So I think we all had a journey in that. So
it was more the rules. It was more the rules with your dad.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, my dad's a Marine, so like that's how he was as a dad.
So you do mass if you're a Catholic kind of thing.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. But he really lived it.
He practices faith. Yeah. He does.
But I think so for me, I was definitely more like my mom, and my mom's like a party girl, and
a lot of fun.
And she's a lot of fun. And so I think I started really like living a double life. I was one way with my family, and I thought I was tricking them, but I probably wasn't really. And then another way with my friends. And so that continued on for a very long time. So I was in college and I was very unhappy.
What were you studying?
I was studying political science.
Wow. We're going to talk about Trump later. Go on.
So I was studying political science. Actually, at that time, I had done an internship with a congresswoman in Capitol Hill, and then I was also nannying for a family, and my boyfriend and I, so this is kind of my conversion and call to FMC. So my boyfriend and I told him, I said, we're going to get married. We've been dating since high school. I said, we're going to get married. We know that. So let's just take a break for a year, since we know we're going to get married and we've been together so long. It's like, that is not what anyone does, but
praise God.
But it was the Lord, because he was my biggest hurdle to the Lord. And so we decided to take a break. And then I realized how absolutely miserable I was, because my whole life was built around him. And so I said, well, you know what? I can be happy without him. And so I created a circle. I called it the Circle of Genevieve. And I filled in all the things that would make me happy. And I was going to start working on those. So I put in, okay, I'm going to start working out. I'm going to go to therapy. I'm going to do better at school. I'm going to do better at work.
Turn this a wee bit just in case.
Okay, there you go. I'm going to do better at work. And I'm going to go out more. I'm going to go out and party more. Like I don't, I always, whatever. So I started working on all these things, and I was doing better in school. I had a better work-life balance. I started doing kickboxing. I went to therapy, and I started going to the bar with my friends more. And I was so frustrated because I was not any happier, and I just didn't understand why. I feel like these are the things that the world tells us that brings happiness, and it was just like, why is this not working? And I think especially going out to the bars more was a terrible idea. And that actually brought me really low. And I just didn't know what to do. I threw myself into my studies because I just didn't know how to handle like the pain that I was feeling. And the interesting thing, which I had forgotten about at this point, on that circle, I still have a picture of it. I put at the bottom, next spiritual life, because I was like, my friends were not practicing Catholics or even Catholics. And I felt a lot of guilt about the life that I was living, but they didn't. And, so I had this, like, just this tug of war that I was like, I need to figure this out. Like, what do I believe? What do I not, because I still went to mass every Sunday, Typically I'd go with my dad. And so anyways, my mom went on a mission trip and with Family Missions Company to Mexico. And on that trip, she came back to the Catholic Church.
Wow.
And
was this because of Teresa?
Yes.
Wow.
She wanted to go visit Teresa and support her. And
wow.
And so she loved it. I mean, yeah, it was hard, but she loved it. So she comes back all fired up and she's like, Genevieve, you gotta go. You gotta go. You gotta go visit your sister. You need to support her. And I was like, okay, well, me and my boyfriend are on a break, so I don't have plans. It was over New Year's. It's like, I guess I'll go now. And so I went. And it was just, and I share that circle to share, like, I was at a very low point. Like I was trying everything.
You knew something was up.
Yes.
Yeah. You were also primed.
Wasn't that so mature to sit down and do a circle though? Like,
very
I'm thinking,
practical too.
Is that your wife? Is that normal for her?
What? The practical part.
Yeah.
The practical is, for sure.
So I went, and it was actually a Life Teen trip, which you guys are familiar with Life Teen. It was a Life Teen with Family Missions Company. And so that I was so thrown off by everyone. I was 22 at the time. Everyone was around my age and they were really into their faith. And I was like, I had always thought, oh, when I turn 30, which at that time was old, I'll get religion, And like, I was like, oh yeah, when I'm 30, I'll do that. And so that was something that was calling me on, because I was like, oh man, like they're my age and they're doing this. And then everyone was so happy. Everyone had so much joy. And I was just like, what is in your circle? What are you doing? What's in your circle?
What's your formula?
And they were like, it's Jesus, And I just was like, really, it was really interesting to see that, to see how happy everyone was. And I really wanted that. And so really feel like it was just good to be in Mexico, stripped of my social media. And even my mom packed my suitcase because I didn't want to go at the last minute. And she packed my suitcase and just t-shirts, sweatpants. Like, I looked horrible the whole time. There was one mirror in the place, like, and it was in the public where everyone was together. Like, it just, I all these things that were important to me that I thought, kind of built myself up, was not there. And I had the best time ever. I was waking up early, and Teresa couldn't believe like how happy I was. And she was just like, what is going on? So yeah, so that really got me. And so they did a desert day where you go out and you just pray for 2 hours in the actual desert. And I really was like, okay, Lord, like I just recognized now amidst the Circle of Genevieve, I also was dealing with depression. I was on depression medicine, didn't feel like it was actually helping me. But I feel like I looked very happy to people. But when I was home, I was very unhappy. So I was like, okay, God, the last year and a half, I was like, I basically have slept so much, like I've wasted the last year and a half. I was like, if I can waste a year and a half and like sleep as much as I did, I was like, I can give you a year and a half. And like, let's see if what you're saying is true. Like, let's see if what these people are saying is true. And if it really is like the way to all this joy and peace. And so I was like, okay, I'll give you a year and a half. I'll do whatever you want. And I'll like all in.
Wow.
And so it was on that week that I felt like God was like, I want you to become a missionary. And I was like,
not that all in.
Yeah. I was like, okay. And I felt like God was saying like, I want you to do this and say yes now here in Mexico before you go home and your boyfriend and your friends and your job tell you otherwise. So I was like, okay. So I go and tell my sister Teresa, who's like totally shocked. And I'm like, I'm going to become a missionary. And she's just like, wow. Like she is just shocked because my family really saw me floundering and just struggling. And Teresa really didn't even know like the full extent to my life and the life that I was living because I kept so much from her. So it was amazing. So I left that trip and it took me a month to get to confession. I was so nervous.
Wow.
I went to the Basilica of the National Shrine, like this huge, my dad would bring us there regularly. And there's like, so many confessionals. So
in Washington, is it?
Yeah, Washington, D.C., where I grew up. And
oh yeah, we were there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, isn't it beautiful?
Beautiful church.
So I went, I'm like feeling the butterflies right now. And it was a great priest and he gave me Psalm 51. But I remember just leaving there and this huge weight lifted and just like, oh my goodness. It was just, it was incredible. The weight that lifted, I didn't realize what a weight like my sins had on me. And actually, even for me, my depression, I think was a lot to do with the life I was living and the way I was hiding.
I feel like crying now. And maybe it's because I'm old and I'm like, I work in the area of bringing people to that place. I like, what a victory.
Yeah.
What a victory.
Yeah. No, and I thought that this was common. I thought that this was, but now I see people on the journey who struggle to get, because then, 9 months later, I joined Family Missions Company. That's not common to actually stick with it. I thought that,
But just to kind of emphasize what you're saying, like you took you didn't actually. God gave you the first conversion experience. Like he was the initiator, but you cooperated.
Yeah.
And that's huge.
I always wonder, it's amazing though. I'm like, God loves me so much to do all that. Like even though I was not honoring him with my life, I just like, wow, like the way he pursued me, even though I didn't deserve it, that really just boggles my mind still. I felt like he pursued me just so much. And so, I went home. I told my boyfriend, it's like, we're on a break, we're not on a break. I was like, I want to practice chastity. And he's like, what the heck is that? And like, that was just a mess. But anyways, so 9 months later, I joined Family Missions Company. So that was a journey of itself to let go of the way that I talked, because I cursed all the time. The way that I dressed was very difficult. My friends, I stopped going out kind of in the evenings with them. And I found it so funny. I went to a bar with a friend for her birthday and I was like, this is so dull. And then I was at the grocery store and I got an opportunity to share with the butcher about my experience in Mexico and my like conversion with Jesus. And I was like so alive. And I was just like, I'm having more fun here with the butcher than I did at the bar,
Yeah.
And so
I actually do know.
So it's like, so then joining Family Missions Company was amazing for me because I never had, I avoided people that had a faith life because they made me feel bad about my life, And so when I went and that's where I met Thomas because he joined and went to the same training as me. Meeting these young guys, I was just like, wow, following the faith, it just was, and so many beautiful families. That was also really healing for me with my own family. Just to see like, it's not God's fault, like
your parents split up.
Yeah, it wasn't God's fault. I really did. I think I blamed him. And I mean, my parents, and now, my mom, I mean, it just, My mom's an amazing Catholic now. She's like I really have lovely parents who have supported me. My whole family, when I said I was doing missions, they were like, great. Like they gave me no issue just because they saw that like I definitely was struggling,
I have 3 questions for you and I hope I remember them all. The first question is, did you finish your degree?
No.
Okay.
So
that's an Irish question. Like we're absolutely obsessed with education. Americans, not so much. They don't care.
Well, so I went back to school because that trip was in January. I said, what can I do to leave this semester? And
Mike's telling you to do something.
Okay, great. Thanks, Mike.
I went back to school. I said, what can I do to finish this semester? And so actually I had been there 4 years, but was not very serious about my school. So they said, well, you can finish it with an associate's if you do these certain classes. And so I figured for me, I was like, I'm doing family missions company for 2 years and then I'll come back. But I never found a reason to go back.
Second question is your depression. Was that the source of your depression? And, how's that going?
So I think depression runs in my family, but I saw a therapist. I was on medicine. I feel like starting in middle school. So I was in the Philippines. I got sent to the Philippines and I ran out of my depression medicine. Didn't really plan this well, but it was fine. And I don't know, that's probably not the case for everyone, but I think for me, so much of it was a weight of just the guilt of the life I was living.
Simplicity.
Yeah. Yes.
And so you're choosing your words very, very carefully there for somebody who might be on depression medication. Be careful before you go off them. If you do go off them, just because it worked for you doesn't mean to say it's going to work for somebody else. But
yes,
what you're saying is what might have been diagnosed as something that is just, whatever family you're from, you just suffer from depression. I think what I'm hearing is you found that very much it was due to the life you were living.
Yes. I mean, and because even I remember writing in my journal, I'm on depression medicine and I don't feel any better, like just really struggling. So for me, it was just that weightlifting with confession and just, I felt so much freedom and even freedom to really be myself. That shocked me. I remember going to a Bible study. I had shaved my head, or maybe my hair was purple. I can't remember. I did a lot of things with my hair after my conversion.
Either one is like, okay.
We're getting to really get to know the real Genevieve.
So I'm in a Bible study with all these little old ladies from this church. And I was like, I had a moment of like, normally I try to present myself. Okay, who am I with? Okay, I'm like this with you. And I was like, here I am with purple hair with all the old ladies at church. And that's just it. This is me. There's no hiding it. And I had to get used to, I could really be myself no matter where I was. And I loved living a life that I could be myself,
This is so good. This conversation is so good.
Yeah.
The third question is, and this is, I don't mean to pry, but
okay.
People might be thinking it, your parents split up, your dad was faithful, your mom wasn't, your mom has a conversion. Did that help their relationship?
Yeah. So when she came back and had her conversion, she did try, because my dad always wore his wedding ring and said he was married, even though they were separated for a long time. She came back and she did try to actually work things out or they dated for a little bit, but it didn't work out, and they ended up getting an annulment. And the beautiful thing is my parents, we celebrate every holiday together. They're always together.
So they come together.
Yes. They have a wonderful relationship, but it wasn't able for them to come back together in that way, but they're so good and they make it's just so nice that we don't have to wonder who's going to come to what. They're always together. So that was my mom's instinct of I'm Catholic again.
Therefore,
we try this.
Yeah. Good on your father as well. That takes a lot of courage. And do you have, apart from Teresa and yourself, are there other siblings in the family?
So there's 4 of us, 4 girls.
Okay.
Teresa's the oldest and I'm the youngest.
Yeah.
Wow. So I think Teresa's actually, her yes to missions affected the whole family. I feel like my whole family can say how it has deepened their own faith life because of that.
Is it the way, what is it about Teresa is it just Teresa, or is it encounters that you happen to have while in the company of Teresa, or is it her prayer? Or what would you say? Or is it all of those things?
I think all of those things. I think everyone has done a mission trip, but my dad, but he would always go down to the mission base in Louisiana. But so I think people have people going on mission trips. But yeah, I think our conversations have been different because of that, because of the lifestyle. But even it was my one sister, we got together, everyone, and my one sister, Charlotte, was like, hey, we say we're Catholic and everything. Why aren't we like praying together on family holidays? Wow. So we did like kids praise and everything. And does that answer it?
One thing I would say too is Teresa, when I was discerning, joining Family Missions Company, she wrote an article on FMC's blog or whatever. And it was about saying yes to Jesus, and he takes care of your family, especially for missionaries. Like you leave your family, your friends. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what happened. She said yes. Teresa said yes to Jesus and made room for Jesus to take care of her family.
Interesting.
And her faithfulness to the Lord, he was faithful to her, and her desire for her family to know Jesus,
I think it was hard for her to leave us because she was a mother hen to the max, which actually hurt our relationship a lot. So really.
What age were you when she left?
I was my first year of college. I remember her, sending me there and helping me get settled.
18 years of age.
18. Yeah.
So what about you, Thomas? What was your story led you to FMC?
Yeah.
Similar or different?
It's extremely different.
Okay. Opposites attract.
Yes. No, extremely different.
What was your life growing up?
Yeah, so my family history was similar as far as that goes. My parents, my mom, when I was 2 or 3, my mom left my dad, my brother, and I, and she was just struggling with a lot of things, alcoholism, drug abuse, and all this stuff. And so she left. So I grew up mainly with my dad and my little brother. My dad realized soon after that we still needed a relationship with our mother. So so every other weekend we'd go spend time with her. But that really left a big old wound for the devil to start messing with me. And so I started believing lies at a young age that if I don't people please, if I don't make people like me, then people will leave me. Yeah. And so a lot of my relationship, as I developed a relationship with the Lord, it was, I'm going to make you happy so you don't leave me, God. I'm going to do what you want. Wow. So so that was kind of like part of that. But yeah, so then when I was, I think 16, my home parish, Sacred Heart in Emporia, Kansas, got a perpetual adoration chapel. And my dad signed my brother, him, and I up for a 2:00 Saturday morning, 2:00 a.m. Time slot. And so he would wake my little brother and I up, and we'd go to this little chapel with him.
He was intense.
Yeah. Yes. No, my dad, that's one thing too, is my dad, I think at some point he was just devastated with my parents' divorce and everything. And, but the Lord called him to forgive my mom, and he got an annulment and all this stuff. And, but there was a time in that devastation where the Lord found a way to enter his life, and he was raised Catholic. And there was, just in his suffering, there was people at work that were harassing him about his Catholic faith, and he didn't know why he was Catholic. He went to Mass on Sunday, that was it. But so he started reading the Bible and listening to Catholic talks, and he just fell in love with Jesus, fell in love with the church. And so I grew up in the wave of that, my dad just being madly in love with the church, with Jesus, and which I thought was extremely boring.
Yeah.
But yeah, so then he brought us to adoration, and my brother and I, they had this big old shag carpet in the middle of this small adoration room. And so my brother and I, just as soon as we got there, we just face planted on that carpet and fell asleep. Eventually, I felt kind of bad that my dad was the only one praying, so I started to stay awake and pray with him, pray the rosary in front of our Blessed Lord and the Eucharist. And it was there that my heart started to change. It started to warm to the Lord.
What age were you at this stage?
I think 16, around that time. So yeah, I would say I started to fall in love with Jesus, but I didn't know that was happening at all. And then I kept growing in my faith, and at that point, and then, but I was like very judgmental. I'm like, my sinfulness is like very interior. It's not,
there's no obvious flaws that we can see,
yeah,
but they're there.
Except right here, right? But yeah, no, they're there and they're deep and they're almost harder to, for the Lord to deal with. So there's a lot of, as I grew in my faith, a lot of judgmentalism towards my friends and family, and which was all a way to protect myself, right? But yeah, the Lord kept growing me, and I just continued to fall in love. I did this program in the States, which I think is similar to NET. It's called Totus Tuus, and you form a team of 2 guys and 2 girls, and you travel around your diocese and do like summer, almost like a vacation Bible schools, and you're basically just showing both elementary school kids, so I don't know what you call that here, but
primary school,
primary and secondary students at different points, just the love of Christ, and try to teach them the faith and make it fun. And it was in doing that, as I went to college, it was a summer program during college, I saw people, and for the first time in my life, which we had mentioned, that I was giving myself completely to others, these kids, to learn the faith. And like, we were praying together as a team. I was extremely exhausted. I had like a lot of social fears about speaking in front of people, and I was like doing it all summer long. So it was like, in a lot of ways it looked terrible, but like I felt so much joy and peace pouring my life out for others. And so I ended up doing that for 3 summers. I just loved it. And that was my first experience of missions, which was beautiful. And then I went to Benedictine College and studied theology and philosophy there. And at the end of my time, I saw these 2 priests that were teaching us Totus Tuus, training us to do this mission work. I saw how awesome they were, and how they were living that spousal imagery of pouring yourself out as a father. And it was just beautiful to me. I remember growing up, seeing my parents' relationship, and just realizing like, this isn't what it's supposed to be like. This is not.
And it didn't take an external example for you to figure that out. You just figured.
No, I just knew it was wrong. Well, this is what happened. Like my parents lived in 2 different cities, and so my parents would drive to the middle and meet. And I remember feeling like a piece of luggage, and just like, because like I'd always wanted to be with my mom, but she wasn't in the picture. And so like, whenever my parents would separate, like my mom would bring us back, I would just like lose it in the car. And so like, I remember on one of those trips realizing like, this isn't what family life's supposed to be like. I'm not supposed to leave my mom. I'm not supposed to leave my dad. I'm supposed to be together. And in that realization, I realized how much I wanted to be a husband and father one day, and I wanted to do it right. And so, so that was kind of that, but so that desire to be a good father came back, and I saw how these priests were like, a good priest is a person that lays himself down. He pours his life out just as a father would, just as a husband would. And so like that spousal imagery drew me to the priesthood. And so after my college, I went to seminary, and I was there for a couple of years, and it was beautiful. I had counseling for the first time. It was free. And just started
worth it for that alone.
Yes. Free made it possible. And the Lord started to work on my humanity, which was very flawed, but I didn't know, and then, but it was beautiful. On the Feast of St. Joseph, my second year of seminary, the Lord started to call me out of the seminary and to marriage. And it was actually beautiful. It comes up. I was in the chapel. It was on the Feast of St. Joseph, like I said, and the Lord, with the gospel, I was actually in adoration again. The gospel that day was, Joseph, do not be afraid to take Mary, your wife. And the Lord just showed me I'm scared of marriage. Mm-hmm. Like, to me, at that point, it would have been easier for me to be a priest because I didn't have to trust anybody to love me and to not leave me like my mom had done. And so it was safer to be a priest. And that's not everybody's call. It's not safe to be a priest, right? It's courageous. But for me, it was safer than being married. But then at the same time, the Lord showed me how much I desired that call to holiness. I desired to be a husband and father. And he actually told me, he showed me a crucifix and he said, freedom is in the nails. And what he meant by that is not, Jesus was most free when those nails were in his hands. He had surrendered and he was committed. Those nails helped him keep his commitment, right? Not that I don't think he was tempted to not keep his commitment, but, and so like what that meant is like, for me, marriage was scary because you have to, if the cross is a symbol of that marriage, you have to ask somebody to get on the cross with you. You have to ask them to love you that much to get on the cross with you. And then you have to trust that they're going to stay on the cross when times when times get hard. And both of those things, I didn't want to ask anybody to make that sacrifice for me. And I didn't want to have to trust somebody that much. Both those things scared me.
Why did you not want to ask somebody?
I think it's a weak self-image, self-esteem kind of thing. It's like, I don't want to ask anybody to make a sacrifice. Like, I'm the one that will make a sacrifice for you.
Were you afraid that they would say no?
Yeah, definitely. That I'm not worth it, right? Yeah. I'm not worth your sacrifice on that cross, which is obviously not true.
Fear of rejection is massive, for all of us.
Yeah. And so, but the Lord showed me that is what you desire. You desire that. And so I went to my spiritual director, shared this, and he's like, he gave me permission to realize that the marriage is a call to holiness and that it is a beautiful way of living a life with Jesus. And I remember like in spiritual direction, just starting to blush with the idea that God was so good that he desired that more than I desired it, the call to marriage. And so I remember I wasn't like depressed or anything, but I remember leaving that spiritual direction and just feeling like joy flood back in my life. And I started like, because like when I'm in a good mood, like I'm humming, I'm singing, and I just started humming, and I wasn't skipping, like, but it could have looked like I was, I was so happy. It was like, for me, it was like this resurrection. It was like Easter morning. Jesus is resurrected. He's alive. And so, so I ended up after, at the beginning of my third year of seminary, leaving. And it was beautiful because it was the first time in my life I disappointed a ton of people. People didn't understand why I was leaving seminary.
Like, you were pleasing people up to that point.
Yeah. And I was also like, and that was, Jesus said, like, I'm Thomas, I'm the one that made the sacrifice for you. Like, your vocation, this is something that's been really important. Your vocation is never going to be a sacrifice more than it is a gift. Whenever you're discerning your vocation, like, it has to first and foremost be a gift that you receive from the Lord. Sacrifice comes with it, guaranteed. But it shouldn't be first a sacrifice. It should be first a gift.
And I think that's something that we confuse in Ireland. And we're going to get back to your story, but it's external people put on Catholics that the guilt that we feel is so immense. Why would anybody bother with the faith? Whereas and sometimes we internally in our faith, sometimes I cable tie myself to the cross.
Yes.
I'm like, that not on properly, and it's like, I don't need to be there. And there's a cross that comes with my life and comes with, the mission and all of that. But I don't have to go looking for it. No. The joy that comes with it is just so much more. As you say, sometimes I need to be reminded of that.
Yes.
And so thank you for that.
That's so good though, like, because we would have a lot of people coming through net that are discerning their vocation and where do they go from net. It's really good. That's really good to kind of say to them, it's a gift.
Yeah.
Not a sacrifice.
Because I remember when I was leaving seminary, just like looking at my seminarian brothers and like realizing if you want to be a priest as much as I want to be married, I want you to be a priest. If that's what you feel, like I want that man being a priest if he's so excited to receive that gift.
Because that can be really hard for guys in seminary when somebody leaves. It's like
very hard.
It's very unsettling. But anyway, back to your story.
Yeah, and so I still wanted to serve the Lord. But it was the first time in my life I disappointed a bunch of people, and I didn't care because I knew Jesus had a plan for my life, and it was what I deeply desired. So I came home, and a few months later, I found out about Family Missions Company. There was a girl in my hometown that her sister, brother-in-law, and their 7 kids were missionaries in the Philippines. and as a family. And I was just blown away because I didn't know you could do missions as a layperson. First of all, I thought you had to be a priest or religious, but then with a whole family was just like mind blowing. And I immediately that day, the Lord gave me a dream I didn't know I had. My dream was to one day have a family, raise a family in missions, in other countries, sharing Jesus with wherever we are. And so, so I joined Family Missions Company in 2013. Genevieve joined the same year.
11 years ago.
Yeah.
Nearly 12.
Yeah. And yeah, it's been beautiful. But that's kind of like what.
So you both joined Family Mission Company. Are you allowed to date on Family Mission Company if you're singles, or like what's the story there? We have very specific rules on that.
Yeah.
And
well, they're guidelines for.
But the rules on.
I
net,
know there are rules, but we don't want to. You don't want to come across like we have rules. It's like it's for the good of the mission and the people on mission.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
Afterwards, they're guidelines. And people can do whatever they want. So, yeah.
You know, we have rules because you cannot date your first year. So I had to break up with my boyfriend. That was like
how did he feel about that?
It was very difficult. But I said, "Oh, don't worry, I'll call you every week." Because that's another thing is you can't be on your phone. You can't be on your phone. You get time at when we joined. It was like you get 2 hours on Sunday. I think it's a little more now. So I said, "Don't worry, I'll call you every week." You know, obviously after a week, I said, I can't do that. So you can't date, you can't drink, and in your phone use. I don't know exactly. The phone use is really limited now. For us, it was like once a week. You could use it for a few hours.
It's very limited, so that you can focus on being present to where you are and not back home.
And that's really important to explain the heart of the rules.
Yes.
And that's kind of what I was getting at.
Sorry,
not that
Sheena,
we don't have rules. We do.
Resolve that conflict really well.
Yeah. But, you know, like, why do you not have your phone? It's because it's a distraction. And we're not saying phones are bad, but for the time that you were in it.
I can even see now, this being our first time in Ireland, like I can use my phone to numb myself to what's going on, to the adjustment, to the transition here, you know? And I'm like, okay, this is why they created that guideline rule, you know, like to really enter in and maybe not also to just try and be living back that old life you were living. I can see now. And then for me, I felt also the not dating, I wouldn't have had any freedom if I was trying to continue a relationship in the States, you know? But yeah, so those are those three. Oh, and then it turns out you can't shave your head either.
We have the same rule. You can't change your image. It's the way you arrive is the way, no massive alterations.
So did you have purple hair when you joined Mission?
Well, so by that point I had shaved my head. And
so that's why she's mentioning it.
And so,
you're some character.
Well, I did it. You know, I did it. My boyfriend was like, "You're not cool anymore." You know, now that I was practicing my faith and trying to live chastity and everything, I was like, "I'm still cool. I'll shave my head." And so I shaved my head and showed that I was very cool. And but yeah, our director called me and was like, "I told her I visited. I said I'm going to shave my head," and she thought I was kidding. And so she calls me and she's like, "You cannot shave your head." She's like, "You got to let it grow out." So actually when we met, I had less hair than Thomas.
I actually had hair back then. Like,
yeah.
Not much, but some.
But that is because whatever culture you're sent into, you don't know what that will mean. And actually in the Philippines, kind of people thought I had same-sex attraction because of my haircut. And I was teaching kids religion and they asked if I was a lesbian. And I was like, what? But the hair conveyed something, you know? And so she was right.
Hard to beat kids, the honest questions that they ask at the same time, you know, like honestly, it's like they cut through all what you're doing actually has a symbolic meaning.
Yes.
That's subliminal that they just come out and they ask it.
Yes.
You know?
So you guys didn't date. Were you attracted or?
No, we didn't like each other that year.
I was so obsessed that first year. I talked about marriage all the time, which was terrible. Like a young guy committed to the Lord, and there's a bunch of it was like a ton of single
12
girls.
Single women and 6 single guys.
I was not very wise. I was ready to get married. Like
good for you.
Which one are you?
yeah. So it was terrible, but for everybody else. But I like
we were really good friends.
We became friends very quickly because we're so different. But it was after our first year of missions, we came back to the States for what they call year in review.
Where did you go your first year?
Yeah, I was sent to India.
Wow.
And
I was in the Philippines. Yeah.
Okay.
And so we both spent 4 years in those places, which was beautiful. But yeah, so after our first year, we came home and somebody was giving a talk about team dynamics, and sometimes opposites are really good for team dynamics. And like these scales fell from my eyes, and I realized how attracted I was to Genevieve and how utterly different she is. She's like, her word, if she would describe herself, is like, her desire for every moment is fun. My desire for every moment is meaning. I need meaning. It doesn't have to be fun. As long as it's meaningful, I can grab it.
You're melancholic and you're phlegmatic.
No, sanguine.
Sanguine, is that
yes,
what it is? Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
She's sanguine choleric.
I think I'm a mixture of both of you.
I'm melancholic.
I want meaningful
phlegmatic.
fun.
Yes.
Melancholic, phlegmatic. What does phlegmatic do?
It goes with the flow.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, no, we try to have meaningful fun. Like if we can have meaningful fun, we're both happy. It's a little more complicated with all of our kids now, but but yeah, so I realized after that first year of knowing her that I was really attracted to her. I saw also every 6 months I'd have to leave India and
for your visa.
For my visa, and we would go to the Philippines. And so I got to see Genevieve like loving and serving the poor, and it was just beautiful. Like I just got to see such an amazing part of her. I remember during our second year, she was like in front of us. We were in the Philippines again, my team from India, and she was walking with somebody in front of me, and she was just talking very loudly, which she can tend to do. And she mentioned how she used to think that after her 2 years, so it's a 2-year commitment. After her 2 years with Family Missions Company, she would just go home and like live a normal life. But she said in that moment that she doesn't think she could ever go back to normal life. And I remember like this, I don't know, get emotional, but I remember just like, wow, like, because I wanted, this is what I wanted. I have no idea why I'm crying now.
That's okay. It's good, Thomas.
I've literally never cried telling that story. But yeah, I remember thinking like, this is that's exciting for me because like I'm really attracted to Genevieve.
Yeah.
The door is open.
Yes.
Yeah,
and so, but then I fell back into fear that Jesus wasn't going to provide a spouse for me within that time, even though I was like, something crazy was happening in my heart with Genevieve. But I was like scared. Like I was like, God, when am I gonna find my wife here? You know?
What age were you at this stage?
I joined a 25 Family Missions Company, so I might have been 27. So I was like, let's go, God. Like I've been out of seminary for a couple years now. And so I started to like become afraid that maybe he was calling me back to seminary. So I really struggled there to trust him and his provision for my vocation, or I'm going to provide this for myself. And so I never pursued Genevieve for a long time because I didn't want to play with her heart. And then
it was your spiritual director.
My spiritual director, my third year, he's like, is there anyone you are interested in? And I went off for an hour about Genevieve and like all the things that like draw me to her. And he's like, have you ever like tried to do anything about that? And I was like, no. He's like, well, why don't you try to do something? And I remember I sent her a message over Skype back then. And I was like, we should talk sometime. And she's like, yeah. But then I realized that next week I was going on a silent retreat. And so like, we just never talked. It just never happened until we came home to the States. And then, until we came home from should I point it at me? To the States, and we had, again, that year in review thing. And again, I had more people like in the community like encourage me to do something about it. And so I finally asked her on a date. But she was.
It was.
Were you on?
Did you know?
No,
I was so
shocking.
Yeah.
It was absolutely shocking. And I looked back and I was like, you never flirted with me. And actually I was like, well, when we were in India together and you put me in the taxi cab with the other people, why didn't you go in the cab with me? Because just all these little moments that I was like.
I put her with a guy I trusted to keep her safe. That's what like.
So no, it was very shocking. It was very shocking, especially because we were so different. He's also shorter than me, which I thought there was laws against marrying people shorter than you, you know?
The height police would be against it.
Yeah. She actually looked up, I remember that she looked up famous couples that the husband's shorter.
I did, just to reassure myself.
Yeah, which was great.
But yeah, but I at that point in my life, I had decided, I kind of was like, you know what? If any good Catholic guy asks me out, I'm just going to say yes. I'll just say yes. You know,
love that. Are you girls all listening to that? Just say yes.
So Thomas asked me and I was floored. I actually was like, can I sit down? Because my knees just went weak. I was so taken off guard.
I got her.
Yeah.
So I was like, and we had such a good friendship. So I was like, yes, you know? And so we went on a date and I was actually, I kind of thought I had to know if I was going to marry him before the first date.
I know. All you girls, listen to this. This is not.
So I got together with a friend and I talked to her about it. And she was like, you don't need to know if you're going to marry him. All you need to know, she was like, all you need to know is what you're going to wear. She was like, that's it. And then she was like, then after the date, it's either a yes to another date, a no to another date, or a maybe, you know? And like, that's it. You're not at that point yet, you know? And I think with Thomas, I was like, in my mind, I was like, hey, I didn't tell anyone besides my closest friends.
She literally told me she didn't want to tell anybody this.
And because I was
How
like,
did that make you feel?
I don't remember feeling anything. I just like,
well,
okay.
I think I told you later on.
I got a date, so like,
Yeah, good for
but
you.
I didn't want the whole, all of our community and friends to know. Because I was like,
it's awkward. If it goes south, it's really
Exactly.
can be really toxic.
yes.
and in my mind, I was like, we're going on one date and that's it. You know, like, what is
Yeah.
this? And it was actually a great date. And you know what? On that date, I had to ask him, I was like, so why did you ask me on a date? Like, I just had no idea. And I was so amazed because he had an answer. He said, well, he was like, something like, I was wondering how to tell you, but you just asked. So, but he was like, well, I think, do you remember?
Yeah.
You want to share it?
Yeah. Well, one thing is Genevieve is so direct. And so like, which is awesome because like, I'm very passive aggressive, but she was so direct. Like, why'd you ask me out? And I was like, yeah, there was three things. Like, I've never met someone that could just cut through a situation and deal with it like in an instant. Like there was another friend of ours that like Genevieve and I were having a hard time, and
we were at a group dinner.
And this person like could shut down and just like everybody would feel it. And Genevieve just addressed it in that moment that Genevieve did something wrong and addressed it, and like it was dealt with in seconds. And I was just like, what? How is that possible? Because I've never dealt with that in my family. Like, things don't get resolved that quickly. Yeah. Very directly, very quickly. Yeah. So that was like beautiful to me. But then like what though?
Well, the first thing you said was that I was really beautiful.
Yeah. Okay.
That's number one.
Yes. And then, but what I really felt is like that Genevieve, I wanted Genevieve to know with her yes to follow the Lord, that she was worthy to be pursued. Like I wanted my asking her out to show her that she's worthy to be pursued. Woo!
It's okay.
It's great to feel emotions after so long, you know?
Yeah. Well, and you know what? It really was, because I look back on my dating history and oftentimes I pursued the guy. Like I liked him. I made it happen. And I felt very strongly after my conversion that the Lord was, well, one, just wanted me, did not want me dating anyone because I'd been dating people for so long, just wanted me. And then that he was going to provide, that it wasn't going to be me making it happen, that it was going to be on him. And so I really felt like God asked me out on a date when Thomas asked me out. Like it was beautiful
too, because like I am, again, phlegmatic, which means I can go with the flow. So I'm not very direct. I'm not very,
which is like, maybe why it took you 3 years.
Yeah, definitely. But the Lord gave me so much grace to pursue her directly.
Yeah.
Like I was not being indirect about when I started to finally pursue her. Like I was full on, I think you guys say over here. So there was so much grace to pursue her directly, which she really enjoyed.
Yeah, no, I appreciated him being so direct. That was very attractive.
Isn't that just amazing? Like that's just amazing because that's not natural. Yeah. So grace,
it was grace,
builds on nature.
We can go back and say that was the Lord acting, like to bring us together.
And I think even for me to receive it and to not take
over,
natural.
Place where you hear his heart.
Yeah.
So just before we go on any further, sometimes we get really caught up in what evangelization is in Ireland, and we don't know how to do it. We don't know what it is, and there's more to it than what we just talked about. But you guys just gave us your testimony. Yeah. You literally just gave us your testimony, and that is the whole of the New Testament. If you read St. Paul's letters, it's St. Paul giving his testimony, talking about stuff that happened, and he's exhorting people, but he always talks about what the Lord did for him.
Yeah.
And it's not that complicated. And people can either choose, like people who listen to this podcast, can either choose to accept or reject your story. But that's your story.
And it's truth.
And it's truth. It's truth.
And I'm an empathetic crier. It's just
Thank you.
And it's not Obama's truth. Like it's actual, it's not a relative truth. It's like this actually happened to you.
I think I need a moment actually to just, let all that sink in. It's just it's such a beautiful story.
Yeah.
It is beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Praise God.
And so people are I'm going to ask you about your necklace.
Well, before you do, there's just a couple of things I'd love if there's people listening who are in that dating zone, is to learn from your openness, and if I may boldly say, learn from your
directness,
residency to be bold. Guys, be bold.
Yeah.
Like what do guys have to lose?
We have a lot to lose because we can be rejected, and
totally.
that can be really hurtful. But at the same time, that's the worst that can happen.
Yeah. And that's what the Lord convicted me of, is like, if Genevieve's gonna reject me, like it is a way that I can lay down my life for her, to let her feel that she's worthy to make the choice to reject me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's self-sacrificing.
Yeah. And it was like God gave me such a desire to lay down my life for her, that like
if she rejected you,
even if she rejected me, it was something I could offer her to let her know she's worthy to be pursued. So yeah,
I know of so many couples now who, a lot of couples are going on Catholic Match, and when that initial request for a date comes along, they're like, I don't think so. But they had that attitude you had. It was like, okay, I'm going to say yes. Yeah. And they're married.
Yeah. And this, we had a situation where in the last few years, like so we work for Net, and the interesting thing is we have a no dating policy. All right. Mm-hmm. And sometimes people are attracted to each other on team.
On mission.
Not
on staff.
On staff they can date. But on mission, they're not allowed to date or whatever. But there sometimes can be attraction there afterwards. Some people act on this attraction. But we had one situation in the last few years where the couple are now married, where the guy was attracted to the girl. She wasn't attracted to him at all. But she said, actually, I'm being asked out on dates by all these guys who are not in their faith.
Yeah.
And here's this really good Catholic guy who's attracted to me, who wants me to go on a date. I'm not attracted to him, but hey, I'll go on a date with him. They're married now.
Yeah.
Literally married.
Yeah.
And it is, and that often happens, and it's a beautiful thing. And actually there's another couple who we met over the summer. Exactly the same thing happened. Not attracted, but hey, let's give it a go, kind of thing. Like it's the guy acting, the girl receiving, and then saying, yes, I'm not really attracted, but I'll give it a go. And they hit it off, And it's like nothing ventured, nothing gained. And I have to speak to my own life before being married to Sheena. Like it is hard being rejected. It is like that doesn't come at zero cost.
Yeah.
Women can be flippant and say, just ask me out, or whatever. Like it does come at a cost, the actual asking a girl out. And it can resonate deeply in places that we're not even aware that it's resonating. But at the same time, nothing will happen unless we make the ask, And we got to, so from a guy's perspective, we've got to, if we're interested in a girl, we've got to make the ask.
Put yourself out there,
Put yourself out there,
And do it in person.
Yeah, not by text.
Well, unless it's Catholic Match, like.
Well, yes, if
one thing
can.
that I would say is beautiful about Genevieve, when she wasn't sure how she felt, she took it to the Lord and asked. And because she had tell about your list of your ideal man.
Oh, golly.
Which wasn't me.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So It was hard because Thomas was not what I had in mind. Like my 6'5", possibly was a professional sports player.
I'm 5'3" and
definitely
a half,
came from a wealthy family, had multiple degrees, spoke multiple languages, was just a list of things that I thought would be good.
None of those are me.
So I brought that to the Lord, and after going on 2 dates with Thomas, and he said that I used to get my identity out of my boyfriends. That all growing up, my identity came from who they were. And he was like, you don't want to date that guy that you just listed off because you will stop getting your identity in me and it'll go to that guy. So he said, yes, Thomas is exactly who he is and doesn't have those things, but that's fine because you're not getting your identity from Thomas. You're getting your identity in the Lord. And so that was really powerful because I realized I did, like, if my boyfriend was so-and-so and we looked good together on social media, like, I felt a lot better about myself.
Wow, that's huge.
Can I stop you there? Because, you know, I understand what you mean when you say God said to me that this, you know, Thomas, I'm not going to get my identity in Thomas, but I was getting my identity in previous boyfriends. What do you mean when you say that? I'm talking about the whole God speaking to you thing.
God said to me,
Yeah, God said to me, are you Moses?
Hearing the Lord's voice.
Or what was Moses' sister's name? Miriam.
Yeah.
So I brought it to my chapel and brought those feelings. And I felt, like God's voice is similar to my own voice in my head, speaking those things. And just all of a sudden, it's like I had this new knowledge and a new way of looking at the situation that I didn't have before I came into the chapel. And then a peace about it. And so it's like I knew that was the Lord. But yes, like seeing the Lord, like almost gave me eyes to see what that list, that unrealistic list, was doing. So does that make sense?
That answers my question. And how do you know, like, how did you learn to get to a place, or how did you learn to do that? How did you know that was God?
I think, well, honestly, in Mexico, when my first conversion, it was like I was in the field and it just, that came up, but talking to him, talking to God. Praying, yes, talking to him.
Is that listening or talking? Or both?
Well, so both. Yeah. And then taking that time to be quiet and see what the Lord says. But And
also how it sits with you is huge.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
He only brings peace.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Only ever. Like if it's condemnation, if it's guilt in a way that makes you feel worse.
Yeah. Or agitation.
One thing that I've always experienced with God is he surprises me. I never believe or know what he's going to say. And when he says it, it's like, it's so nuanced that like it has to be him, because I would have never came up with that great idea or great, like, so he's always surprised me with his mercy, his goodness, his like middle road kind of stuff.
Does stuff like what happened to Genevieve happen to you, Thomas? Like God speaking to you?
Yeah. One way that I've found that he speaks to me is I read the daily readings, particularly the gospel. And a lot of times, like I'll read it a few times and a word or something might hit me. And then I'll ask him like, why, what is this? What is this hitting me, Jesus? Like, and then like,
Lectio Divina.
Yeah. Lectio Divina, basically. And I just have a conversation about that. And a lot of times I hear what he's saying to me in my heart. It's not a hearing. It's not, I literally have never heard God say anything like that. But it's like a realization of what he is saying in my heart. If that makes sense.
Totally makes sense. And I listened to the Abiding Together podcast, and this past week they have I love what they did. They actually did a Lectio Divina on their podcast, because it's easy to talk about, when I prayed this happened, but there's some people who actually show me what you mean. Yeah. Like, and so they demonstrated it for them, and how the Lord can speak, and then what to do, how to action what he speaks to you.
So do you guys have holy conversations all the time?
Like between us and
between the two of you, like, so you I'm assuming, do you guys have a daily prayer routine?
It's a little rocky right now as we're trying to adjust to Ireland.
Yeah.
We have a daily personal prayer.
We try, but yeah, I try to wake up early before people wake up and talk to the Lord. I try to read the gospel
for the day,
and talk to him about it. If I can stay awake, at this point.
And then I do morning prayer when I'm nursing Cecilia in the morning. She wakes me up and I pray with her. And we were in a good rhythm of praying together. We'd nurse Cecilia at night and pray during that time. And then now she's just a bit older. You can't talk. And
exactly. Because she wants to chat with you.
I think we relish those conversations, but like with our kids now. So we have Augustine who's 4, Agnes who's 2.5, and Cecilia who's 7.
7 months.
7 months, not 7 years old. Yeah, very different. And so particularly Augustine, we don't get to talk too much when he's so chatty. So holy conversations sometimes. This is a great conversation.
This is a great conversation. And I was just thinking of the last time that we went out for dinner. I felt like we talked all night. But it's great now we're hearing your story.
Hear your story. It's so good. And the thing is, so you guys are here in Ireland as missionaries. People can look at that and say they have it perfect. They have the perfect life and whatever. And there is no perfect life. There is no utopia. Like it's the same for us. It's we're leading a mission. It is very easy to assume that we have everything sorted. We're just on a journey.
Yeah.
But we're on the journey.
Yeah.
And we're talking about the journey.
We're talking about it.
Yeah.
So do you two talk about your prayer life amongst each other, or do you talk about, stuff that the Lord is bringing up with you? Is that something? Because in a lot of marriages globally, you've one person in the couple who's more into it than the other.
Yeah.
And that can be a big burden for the person who is less into it, as well as the person who's more into it, because they have to really dumb it down and whatever, and just keep quiet.
We are super blessed that we both, we do love to talk about what the Lord's saying to us and like how he's calling us on. So we both love to talk about that. And
I'm typically very excited, and I'll be like, the kids will be around and be like, yeah. And then my prayer time this morning, this really struck out to me. And then this quote, and then Thomas is like, it's like everything happening.
I can't.
There's too much going on.
Tell me when the kids are sleeping.
There was one point where the Lord was like, so we're blessed that like we met in the context of following the Lord, and a call to marriage was a call to follow the Lord more deeply in this particular way. But I remember Genevieve had there was this point where she was, again, this is before we were dating or anything, but just the Lord saying how he would pick your spouse.
Oh, my experience with that?
Yeah.
Oh, golly. I really struggled. I struggled with wanting to go back to, like, maybe my ex-boyfriend was who I should marry, because I really struggled with trusting that the Lord would provide a spouse who wasn't what I thought would be absolutely boring and like very religious and just lead a very dull life. And I remember I was in the church in the Philippines praying, and they had a huge Divine Mercy image of Jesus, like 10 feet tall. And God just said to me, he was like, again, a voice in my head was, you don't trust me. Like, you don't trust me to pick a spouse. And that like knocked me over, because I was like, you're right.
But it wasn't condemnation.
No, it was.
It's never in condemnation.
It was. I feel like he shed my eyes to see. Oh,
the truth,
that's why I'm wondering if I should go back to my ex-boyfriend. Who I hadn't talked to in 2 years. As if he's gonna want like, hey, you know. But that felt safe. That was familiar. So I remember I walked around the church just like in awe of like, wow, yeah, I trust God so much. Here I am living in the Philippines, but yet I do not trust you with this part of my life. And so I remember I just was walking around the church. It was 10 p.m. I was there by myself, and it's a huge church, walking down the aisle. And I just felt like the Lord say, again in my head, but if you pick your spouse, you are going to leave out the side door. Like, it's like you get to the altar where you're married and you're going to leave out the side door. Almost like anyways, I'll go on with it. But, and then I had gone up to the altar and I was sitting in front of the tabernacle, and he said, if you let me pick your spouse, it will be someone who brings you closer to me. Wow. And that, even to some people that might be so obvious, but that to me was like, oh, wow. Yeah. And as you saw my list of criteria for a husband, I would not have picked, a holy, faithful man was not on that list. Right. And so I feel like I had a very unconverted idea of what a future spouse would be. And so what is actually crazy, and just God is so amazing. When Thomas proposed to me, he proposed to me in the Philippines. He came, and his plans for proposal were shot. God ruined them.
I was pretty upset about it.
It was hard for him. And he ended up proposing to me in that church right in front of the tabernacle. And
where he had promised her a spouse.
And I was overwhelmed by him proposing, but overwhelmed because it hit me right there. Like, wow, I am full circle. Like you said, I don't know if it was a year or two before, like that you would bring me someone that would bring me closer to you. And here we were right in front of that tabernacle, not where Thomas wanted to be proposing, not even where I wanted to be, but like, there it was, and it was just like, oh my goodness, God is so real.
And you, like, I think he's honoring you too for your trust in him. You trusted an area of your life that it's hard to trust someone with.
And so I'm listening to you two, and I'm thinking of like, there's so many, because we work with young people, there are so many young women who my heart goes out to. I want them to meet a great guy.
Yeah.
Guys to meet great women.
And guys to meet a great girl. And great guys to meet a great girl. And, it's like, how do we handle this situation other than have this conversation and hope that it will inspire some people the women to trust and the men to act?
Well, I think Emily Wilson, a lot of people follow her she's written books and blogger and Instagram, but she actually saw how difficult it was for people to meet. And on her, I think it was her Instagram, she set up this thing where it's like, okay, put your name on here if you'd like to date. And we're going to a wedding next month.
Oh, wow.
An Irish girl and a Canadian girl who met that way.
Irish girl and Canadian guy.
Sorry.
There's not a gay wedding, but
sorry.
It's a Catholic wedding.
Anyway, it's like being open to things have changed.
Yeah.
And I think people have to be open to new ways of meeting.
And I remember I just continually always brought it to prayer. Like I liked someone and I'd just go and sit before the Lord in the Eucharist and be like, hey, I like this guy. And there was a verse he gave me and I can't find it right now, but it says, open up for the nation that is just, like he who keeps his trust in you or something. But that God gave me that verse and it would remind me like, wait, you are waiting for a good and holy man. Because oftentimes I'd like a guy, hey, there's the trash guy, and it's like, God is like, no, back up, wait. And then also would continually remind me, he's like, I don't know if it's Psalm 37, trust that I will act. That I remember I really wanted to act on a guy that I liked in the Philippines, and God told me to stop. And he was like, trust that I will act. And I thought, oh, okay, surely that God will just, he's work things out with this guy. But actually it was, that was when I went home that Thomas had asked me out. But anyways, yeah. So I feel like just always bringing those desires, like when you have desires, not to hide them or put them down, but bring them to the Lord.
Yes.
To continually, let your desires be known to the Lord.
Yeah. Thomas, what would you say?
Yeah. I think like for me as a guy pursuing Genevieve, like it's to trust. I feel like it's all trust. Like the one thing the Lord wants in all of our lives is that he can see that we're trying, or we trust him, or we're trying to trust him. So I think for me, like I don't remember what the question was, but like, it's like all goes back down to trust. Like, do I trust you, Jesus, with this part of my life? Are you faithful? Do I trust that you will be faithful? Or can I try to trust you,
And ultimately, I guess the trust issues, you said something at the very start about, that you were there with your theology, but your humanity had to be worked on.
Yeah.
And I don't think that we really know enough about our humanity and how that works and how it affects that trust.
Totally. Yeah. I'm totally with you. Funny, we were just talking about this at work, and, being faithful is a prerequisite for mission. The human formation aspect is something that we never, what I'm trying to get across is having a living faith, having a personal relationship with Jesus is something that we need to be on mission. You don't just need it for mission, you need it for life. Okay. Yeah. To live a Christian life, to live a Catholic life, we need to have a living relationship with the living God. And that's not nothing, that's everything. That's a prerequisite for being on mission. What is particular about mission, and disagree with me if you disagree with me, is the human formation aspect of it. Because sometimes we have a living faith with a living God, and our behavior is actually not measuring up to that. Or we don't know how to handle situations. We don't have the training, all that sort of thing. We don't know how to resolve conflict, which is a big one. I'm sure you guys have a lot of training on that, and we do too, but it's so the prerequisite is a living faith with a living God. What NET focuses on after we make sure that people have that is to ensure that they have the human information to be able to deal with the situations as they arise.
Yeah.
What would you say to that?
It's kind of like it's an ongoing life.
Yes, lifelong journey.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why are you in Ireland? Why did you choose Ireland? This makes me look really good.
Yeah, it was actually funny as you introduced the podcast. I was like, wow, this is like, you're kind of what started it. I think, so you can share first.
Well, the Lord started it, but Tony helped. So my middle name's Patrick. I've always loved St. Patrick. And so a couple years ago, I was doing groundskeeping and maintenance work at the mission base in Louisiana. And so I could listen to music and audiobooks and stuff while I was mowing the grass. And around the Feast of St. Patrick, I started listening to an audiobook about his life. It was just awesome. He's like one of the greatest missionaries of all time. Yeah. And so humble. If you read any of his stuff, he's so humble. And at the end of his life, there's a story on this audiobook. At the end of his life, he has this vision of Ireland. And at the time where he was dying, the country was just full of faith. There's these flames of faith just rising, giving glory to God. But the Lord showed him that slowly over the course of time, over the course of centuries, those flames would die down to the point where there was no longer any flame at all found in this country, but just a few burning coals deep in the earth. And when St. Patrick saw that, he just was like heartbroken. He's given his life to the people of Ireland to have faith. And so he started begging the Lord for his grace and mercy in that time of spiritual darkness to fall back on the people here. And he has a second part of the vision where those flames slowly start to rise in the northern part. So Ulster, not Northern Ireland, but the top part of Ireland, they would start to rise and spread again across the country to their former glory. And two things happened to me when I heard that story. I was like cut to the heart with the fact that I feel like that place of spiritual darkness is right now. If you look at the history of Ireland, and I'm no expert of that, but as far as faith goes, I think Ireland is a land with burning coals, but not a lot of faith rising, giving glory to God. And so I immediately wanted to go do something about that. I wanted to come do something about that. Find those coals that were still burning in the earth and to do whatever our family could to support them. To help those flames rise again. And so I came home and told Genevieve that.
And I thought that was a crazy idea. I just thought that was a crazy idea. It's Ireland. It's like, it's Catholic Ireland, You don't go on mission there.
Interesting.
I really didn't know a lot about the state of Ireland. Wow. But I thought, and we had served both in Asia. So I always envisioned we'd go back to Asia.
Some third world country, Asia.
Yes.
Asian country.
Yeah. Like that was kind of my idea of things. And so Thomas, he was persistent and kept talking to people about this desire. And
good on you, Thomas.
But again, it's the grace of God. Like I'm not direct in my nature, but the Lord gives me.
And you go with the flow in your nature.
Yeah, but the Lord said like this is it, and I'm like I'm on board. Like let's do this. Let's go to Ireland.
Multiple people had sent us the podcast with you on it. Speaking
Matt Frad and
speaking to Matt Frad and
his podcast. Yeah.
So we listened to it together, right? Or you had listened to it already?
I listened to it.
Oh, and then he came home and showed it to me. And you were like, if you're thinking about mission, well, say it.
If you're, I don't know what I said.
He said, if you're thinking about, I'm not going to act like your accent, but if you're thinking about doing missions in Ireland, get your butts over here. Come in droves. We need you.
Yeah. We big time need you.
And then you said you think in particular Americans are going to be pivotal in the re-evangelization of Ireland.
Absolutely.
And so when I shared that with Genevieve, like we both had goosebumps.
And it was an eye opener to me. I was like, oh, and then you shared about the history of Ireland. It was fascinating. It was like, oh, okay, this is the real deal. And so Thomas was like, I got to get his number, So
I tried to I got on Mad Fred's podcast and I was trying to get your number and I just got some automated response. And so I was like, that's not going to work.
So somehow we finally got your number and chatted with you.
It was like we had 30 minutes of technical issues to get a hold of you, and then I knew this was going to be from the Lord, because like whenever something good's happening, the devil.
But what's interesting is this was in context of, we were also looking at Japan for mission, and so we set up a call with someone in Japan as well, and it just went flat. Like there just was nothing there, and it just was no connection. It just, after the call, both of us were like, oh, I don't know about that. And so then we talked to you, and we also talked to Father Isaac, who he used to be
CFRs.
with the CFRs. And
he's still with the CFRs. He used to be
with Family Missions Company.
Yeah, he did used to be.
And so we talked to both of you, and there was just like an excitement and a desire. And both of you were like, yes, I could see your family serving here. And
God.
You were the one who said, you were like, you really should come visit first though. And so that's what got that going. And it was like, okay, let's go visit.
And it's so interesting. You guys came and we were spending some time with you, and then we prayed with you, and it was, I had an image. And again, sometimes the Lord will give us an image. It's not a vision, but it's an image of a thing. And what I saw was this little pin, and I can still see it really clearly. And I didn't know what it meant, but I said, I see a pen. I see a pen. I did say to you at the time, I see a pen.
Like a peg, I think you said.
Like a peg.
Yeah.
And hadn't a clue what it meant, but it was...
I totally thought it was Judas and Holofernes, and you're going to stab somebody with it.
Wow. Yeah, well, hopefully you'll do that for the enemy. But it's... and it was some days later, I was going to visit you guys in Derry. I was in Derry working, and I just thought I'd call and see you because I'm in Derry. And as I was walking up to knock on the door, it was like, it's a linchpin.
Wow.
It's a linchpin. This is a linchpin. The Lord is saying these guys are going to be pivotal. Like without this little thing, which is not much, without this little thing.
Nothing fancy about it.
Nothing fancy about it. Without this little pin, the engine doesn't work.
Wow.
The machine doesn't work without this thing. And it's like, again, to confirm that with you, and we're so grateful that you're here, that you're
and it was an instant bond.
It was an instant fit. And so we had a few people reach out to us from that interview, and, really, really great people, and it just didn't work out. And then you guys came, and it was like, and you just know.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
And here you are, and you've 2 months in. I think it's way too soon to say, so how has it been?
Yeah.
But
Or is it too soon to say, what does it mean to be Irish? Like, what's your impression of the Irish people? And
I think it's way too soon, but just a little bit.
Yeah, just a little bit. Yeah, don't feel under pressure by that.
Because you're probably still just getting your feet.
Yeah,
you're surrounded by Americans anyway.
Yeah, well, yes. No, we are in a time where it's still a big transition. It's just still such a big transition. And I remember the first few weeks of being here, even though the accent isn't that strong, I found it so tiring, as if I was listening to another language of the accent, and especially my neighbor, understanding her accent and her mumble. So that's been interesting to me, just seeing more just driving on the left side of the road, all the little things that you just don't think about. Well, they all add up,
And you have a relatively new baby.
Yeah, and I think our family life would be stressful wherever we lived, with 3 little kids. Yeah. But I think one thing that has surprised me is how everyone is open to chat. Everyone will chat with you, and I love that because I love talking to people.
That's
and
so
just
good.
everywhere you go, you just have a chat.
That's great.
And what do you talk about?
Well, gosh, let me think. I'm trying to think of when I've chatted with someone last.
When you have kids, it's easy. It's easier.
Yes.
Talk about the kids.
Well, gosh. And even after Mass, I find that like people are very open to talk. And of course, they want to talk about the kids and whatnot. What do we talk about? Honestly, it could be one guy stopped us. We were in Mr. G's variety store and looking at things, and he stops us and he asks how old Agnes is. And then he starts talking about his own granddaughter and, just telling about the story, how she was born. And it's been anything, really.
Yeah, so good.
But just people's openness. And you know what? It's funny because my sister Teresa was kind of in a hurry, and just recognizing like, oh, you can't really be in a hurry with that. Like you have to slow down and take that moment to just chat, But I have really appreciated that.
That's so good.
So,
what you, Thomas?
Yeah, no, I think we're trained to not assume we understand the people we serve. But one thing I remember, John Paul II, his feast day today.
Today,
pray for us, yeah. At least in the States, I don't know if it's
We
different.
have a different calendar here, but it probably is.
Yeah.
But he said like you cannot serve a people you do not first love. And so like just asking the Lord to help us love the people of Ireland more and more so that we can have a greater desire to understand the way Irish people think. Because like everybody's different. Like you can't overgeneralize a people, but if I was to overgeneralize a people, I feel very Irish. I'm not Irish. Thank you.
You could pass. Both of you could pass for Irish people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If somebody told me on our first trip last year, somebody said I would have thought you were Irish if you didn't start speaking.
Yeah.
And so I took that as a compliment. But there's a melancholy here, I would say.
And that's Irish.
Yeah. And that's me.
Yeah.
So like in a lot of ways, I feel very like at home here as far as like who I am perceiving the Irish people to be.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's a lot of overgeneralizations, and we'll shed those as we grow closer.
And everybody is, you're so wise, you know.
Oh, thank you.
That's a generalization and a general impression.
I think also because of who you are, you're going to get a lot of melancholy because people are going to open up to you. Like you said, like people just want to talk, right? So I know I've experienced this before when I've gone abroad and I'm representing NET. It's like people share their lives with you.
Yeah.
And you're just blown away by their trust.
Yeah.
You know, so it's a lot of it is because of who you are.
Yeah. Praise God. Thank you, Jesus.
So, have you any other questions, or is it time to wrap it up?
I think because the kids are out there, we should wrap it up.
Sheena's tapping me under the table.
I'm just thinking of them.
Yeah, thank you. I've been thinking about them for a while.
In terms of like, what is the Lord doing in your lives, and just like let's take a minute to reflect on what is happening in our lives right now. You know, and you guys want to go first?
Or something you've learned or that's impacted you.
Just so you know that we don't have our stuff together. One thing that the Lord's perpetually, since our son was born 4.5 years ago, I've struggled with like impatience, anger, very normal.
Absolutely.
But I didn't struggle with that stuff before, I would say, or that I didn't see. And so I think that's one thing, in this time of transition, it's been particularly stressful. I've been a little more impatient and a little more not the father that God the Father is to me. And so like that's one thing that the Lord's every day he's calling me to. Like even last week's gospel about not lording it over people under you. Like I need to grow in patience and grow in gentleness with my children. Because I have a ways to go in being the father that I want to be, the father that God's calling me to be. So like that's what the Lord's calling me to.
And can I just say, I know we're in a different stage in the podcast, but we're sharing about what God is doing or where we're at. A fresh wave of sadness has come over the church in Ireland because of a scoping report that the government did on sex abuse in Irish Catholic schools. They didn't include any other institutions. They didn't include any other denominational schools. It was just purely Catholic schools. And so there's a whole new wave of sadness in the Irish people who've been affected by that historically, that is just pouring over and it's just, again, it's a reminder of the sins of the past.
Yeah.
You know, when I was a kid and I first heard about a priest doing bad things, I just didn't want to believe it. I didn't even think it was possible, you know? And I think part of his formation in that the priest had to be perfect. He had to pretend to be perfect, even if he wasn't. He might have been an alcoholic, but he had to pretend that everything was okay. And I think the sooner we get to a place where, if we're not already there, where we're recognizing as priests, we're priest, prophet, and king, but as our ministerial priesthood is able to say, I am not perfect. I don't have all my stuff together. I can list off where my weaknesses are, and just as you know, you're not going to get perfect here, you know.
Yeah.
And it's just the way you talked about, you know, you're working on your patience, and you can sing that one for me, but it's like we need that for the priesthood because that's humanity.
Yeah.
You know, and priests are human.
Yeah.
Sorry, Genevieve.
Yeah, no, that's good. For me, what I've been reading a lot about lately is phone use. I think as for me in the stress of the transition, I've been turning to my phone a lot and I don't like that. And so I've just been reading different articles. Right now I'm reading a book called Digital Minimalism. I'm like, okay, I don't like what this is doing in my life and how I'm showing up for my kids and even Thomas. It's like, okay, I need to make some hard sacrifices and I'm ready to. And so right now that is kind of, since being here, the Lord, like when we went on that little day retreat, like I felt like the Lord was asking me to put my phone down. Like I do feel like it's holding me back from even being fully present, fully transitioning. So yeah, that is for me what's been kind of in my mind of like, okay, I need to make some sacrifices. What is it going to be? What is it going to look like? But also I feel like I've seen the ugliness of it, the ugliness of my phone use, how it isolates me from Thomas, how it distracts me from the kids. You know, it's like, okay, that I'm like finally ready and willing to say like, okay, I'm willing to sacrifice the things that I think I like about it for the greater good. So that's been on my mind a lot. And you can ask me in a month, how's it going?
Yeah, good for you.
But yeah.
Good for you. And again, we don't have to have it all perfect. And hopefully what you're saying will it's resonating with me. I'm like, yeah, I've had to cut down looking at cars to twice a day. I just feel such freedom from looking at cars, you know, and it sounds really benign. It sounds really simple, but it's
we all have our stuff.
Yeah, we can be compulsively addicted to a certain app or a certain thing, you know, our passions, and we need to bridle them.
Yeah.
You know, and phones their algorithm is set up to addict us.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, but I think we've also forgotten how to rest.
Yes.
You know, and because even last night I was so tired, drove up and down to Dublin Sunday, got up early, ran all day, and then by 6 o'clock I was spent, but it was too early to go to sleep. So I sat on the couch with my phone and I literally was on there doing silly things, puzzles or whatever. So when it came time to go to bed, my brain was buzzing and I actually didn't sleep last night.
Wow.
Yeah. So I think, you know, we've forgotten how to sit and read a book or just
Play cards.
Yeah, well, we do that pretty well. But, you know, last night I did not do that very well.
So what's happening to you?
Gosh, there's so many things that I would love to share about. Like the course I'm doing at the moment is on marriage, family and evangelization. And originally at the start, I was like, I know all this stuff. Like, boy, am I learning a ton of stuff. And it has just changed completely how I look at marriage. And we can talk about that another day. I think we could even do a podcast on that. But internally, what's happening with me is I feel... So for my prayer time, I'm reading a book called My Daily Life. A lot of people have heard of My Daily Bread. It's Father Anthony Paoni, I think he's how you say it. But the Daily Bread is about like, you know, it's deeply spiritual and you read a bit every day. But this is about our humanity, my humanity and what it means to be human. And with the Lord, you know, and I'm learning so much about myself and others around me and how we work and how I work. So one of the biggest things that I've become aware of is that I am emotionally charged a lot in conflict. Or when people say hurtful things to me, my emotions go and I don't look at things rationally or look at the facts. I go immediately to like, I'm being crucified here, you know, instead of, okay, these guys can run away with me, you know, and I can lose all sight of reality. So my actual prayer this week has been, Lord, just, and that's the way he works. He makes you so aware of something that's within you that you can't not but work on it, right? Yeah. So my prayer has been, help me to just look at the facts and not suppress my emotions, but keep them in check. Yeah, that's me.
For me, it's interesting. I'll tell you a story and that will indicate where God is at in my life. I went to confession on Saturday after Mass and it went in, queued up, get into confession. And the priest has a the holy oil, the oil of anointing, whatever. And he's like, so this is for you. He said, when I went to the sacristy after saying mass, the Lord told me to bring it to confession. I didn't know who it was for, but you landed in a confession. I know it's for you. And the hairs are standing. He said, I'm using his words. He says, the hairs are standing on the back of my head as I'm saying this to you. I'm getting goosebumps as I'm saying this to you. The Lord wants you to know that you are his. It's not about mortality. You're not going to die.
That's when you told me this. I was like, what?
You're not going to die. But the Lord wants you to know that you are his. And I'm like, okay. But like, that's
anointed.
Yeah, I got anointed. I got my hands anointed, and it was a beautiful thing. And I'm really taking that to prayer. It's like I am his, and I don't have to worry about it. Now. The thing is, it's easier said than done.
Yeah.
But I don't have to worry about how things are going to turn out or whatever. It's I am his, and the rest is cascading effects of that. I am his,
I think this podcast has almost been about how the Lord communicates, right? For you guys, that was very clear. And like, wasn't that just, I love the way he does things like that. It's just a little
that's amazing.
There you are.
Yeah.
Wow.
Amen. And we believe in a good God who, who loves us incredibly. And back to the crucifix at the start, it's like the corpus, it's like, it's powerful and amazing.
And I think the temptation, not to make this go another hour, but the temptation is for me to say, I will do that too before I receive the gift.
Yeah.
Like, he's a good God if you first receive what that meant. His love for me brought him there. And then the sacrifice of.
And it's only a tiny sacrifice.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's big, but oftentimes it's just like he gives us what we're able for. Amen. Thank you guys so much. It's been such a pleasure talking with you both.
Awesome.
And you've been so good to come along and have a chat with us.
And we'll revisit and
that'd be awesome.
hear how it's going. Talk about something else.
Yeah, thank you guys. This has been a joy remembering our marriage and our dating story. Yeah.
Is this your first podcast?
So third?
Maybe third.
This is the first one I think is pretty big.
Cool.
Pretty well. I think they've all been as a couple.
First in-person podcast.
That's true.
It's all been virtual.
Wow. Yeah. There's something that happens in person, even if it's people are watching it virtually. There's a magic that happens in person.
No, this has been magical for sure.
Yeah, amen. Mike, thank you so much for manning the desk, and shout out to Mike. God bless you. Hey guys, hope you enjoyed this video. Please like, share, and subscribe. It's free. Share with your family and friends. Enjoy.